Over the last 2 nights, we have been setting the stage for a discussion of the path of virtue and righteousness and salvation that has been outlined for us in the Quran and through the lived example of our beloved Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa and his family and his progeny. The Quran says that it is the believers who will attain salvation, and the Quran describes some of the attributes of the believers in these verses of Surah Al-Mu'minun, and other attributes are mentioned in other verses of the Quran and in the sayings of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. And to understand that discussion, we asked a difficult question and began to provide a perspective that, inshallah, will help us answer that question. The question that comes into many of our minds is to live a good life, to succeed, to achieve righteousness or salvation. Why do you need religion? Why isn't it enough just to be a good person? That is the first part of the question. Our answer to that is that in light of the usage of the word deen and fiqh in the Quran and the understanding of religion that we have been given by Ahlul Bayt, all of those things that you might call being a good person are part of religion. So it's not that you're kind because it makes you feel good. And you are just because you want other people to be just towards you. Just on a human level. And then religion comes on top of that. But rather, being good makes you feel good because Allah made you that way. That is the fitrah. And He made you that way because He wants you to appreciate good and value it over evil, appreciate justice and value it over injustice in order to come towards Him. That is the fitrah. And that is the basis of deen. So, religion is not a building that is placed upon a foundation of humanity for us to say that why do you need religion? Religion is, in the Islamic conception, that foundation and the building. You need to extend the concept of religion that we have and include that foundation that popular culture just calls being a good person, or a humanism, which is sometimes divorced from religion. But in its essence, it can't be divorced from religion, because that feeling of altruism or goodness that we admire and that we try to adopt is only there because it was placed there by Allah. And it was created by Allah. And so it is the very essence of religion. And that is why when we try to translate the word deen, we find it very difficult to do so in a comprehensive sense in English. Maybe the best approximation that we can give is a way of life. But even way of life is not a good translation for deen. Because way of life implies what you do and how you express yourself. So my way of life is my values and my cultures as they are expressed in the actions, the doings of my life. Whereas deen is defined in the Quran as deenul haq, the religion of truth. وَالَّذِي أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ بِالْهُدَى وَدِينِ الْحَقِّ. And if deen is deenul haq, then haq is the foundation of existence itself. خَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِالْحَقِّ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. So the very secret of creation is haq, and deen is deenul haq. So it's not your laws, and it's not your beliefs, and it's not your way of life. Although we use those words because we have very few expressions that can include the entire meaning. But it is the entirety of your beliefs and your values and your actions and words and your entire orientation within life, what you submit to and what you live for is your deen. Even if you say, I don't have a religion, because you still live a life according to certain principles. And that orientation, that value system, which expresses itself in your actions, is your deen. And that is what the Quran tells us Islam is. So there is no foundation of your humanity outside of deen, because deen is deenul haq, and haq is the basis of existence and creation. We don't exist outside of truth. And we will describe what that means shortly. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. But before we describe in more detail what is meant by haq, let us explore the implication of deen being intrinsic to our being. There's many things that we believe and that we even hold to be our values, but we don't really live up to it. How many of us say that we are concerned about the environment? Most of us would say that we are concerned about the environment. Bothers us that there is pollution. It bothers us that there is wastage. It bothers us that sometimes the poorest and most vulnerable people suffer the most from the degradation of human society. But most of us, although we do value it, and we do affirm it, are not really ready to sacrifice too much for the betterment of the environment. And I'm using this just as an example. I don't want to say that if you don't use a plastic bag, you're saving the environment. The true degradation of the environment is something that is beyond whether you drink from a water bottle or you don't, or you use a plastic bag or don't. If you look at statistics, then industrial and military pollution is the true cause of the majority of the degradation in the world. And it's kind of fooling ourselves to think that the solution is for you to sort your milk cartons and your recyclables into a separate place then to where you throw your trash. That's just a way to distract people and not change the policy. I don't want to buy into that mistake. But I do want to use it as an example. And as an example, even though the true cause of environmental degradation is not the small decisions that you and I make, or the greatest cause is not those small decisions, they are a factor. And they are the factor that you and I have the greatest control over. And so how many of us can say that we go out of our way to avoid that plastic bottle? Because when we're thirsty, we'll suffer the thirst a little bit, wait for a drinking fountain, or drink tap water, even if it doesn't taste quite as good, as long as there is no health concern. But we're willing to sacrifice. How many of us are willing to turn our thermostat down 5 degrees in the winter and use socks and sweaters and shawls to keep ourselves warm, or minimize the use of refrigerants and air conditioning in the summer, even if it's a little bit discomfort, it causes a little bit of discomfort, because we believe in the environment. Again, I'm not saying that is the biggest factor, but it is a factor. And it is the factor that you and I have the greatest control over. If we think of being as our system of expression, or what we vocalize, then we might say that we all believe in the environment. But when we think of being as a comprehensive statement of how we live our life and why we live our life that way and what we submit to, at every decision, at every moment in our life, we get two benefits. Number one, we are true to ourselves in recognizing that I just call myself an environmentalist, but I'm not willing to sacrifice. When it's cold, in a true Chicago winter, if I can put the remote on my phone and turn it on my car and turn it on remotely, I'm going to go to a warm car rather than put my hand on a cold steering wheel, because it's more comfortable for me, regardless of whether that is the best way that I can be a steward of the environment or not. It gives me a little bit of a mirror, so I am real with myself. And then it also gives me the other benefit of a solution. That sometimes when we want to solve problems, we go and we look outside and we just think of how society needs to change or how actions need to change. But recognizing that being comes from the deepest corners and recesses of our soul reminds us that the solution also has to come from the source and not just from the outcome and the result. True solution must come from that same place that being comes from, which is the deepest foundation of our being and our beliefs, from which our words and our actions emanate. So that conception gives us those two benefits. It holds a mirror up to us so we don't fool ourselves into thinking that I'm a good person without holding ourselves responsible for being a good person. And it also gives us a better understanding of where the solution to the problems that we know are problems will lie. And that solution lies by examining the root and not just the symptoms and the effects. So all of that is about the first question, which is, why do we need to, or how is it that that human foundation that people think is independent of religion is part of religion? That is also part of your deen. Call it religion, call it way of life, call it whatever name you may call it, but that is deen. And that is the essence of deen. And that is why there is a very beautiful hadith of our beloved Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. هل الدين إلا الحب والبغض, or هل الدين إلا الحب والبغض في الله. The essence of religion is to have love and to have a disassociation and a dislike for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because love is the most comprehensive of the emotions that describes the origin and then the effect and the outcome of our actions. If you love something, then you consciously move towards it. And even if you're consciously not moving towards it, your subconscious is still within the gravitational force of what you love. And And when the Prophet says that is the essence of deen, the Prophet is reminding us of the comprehensive nature of deen. It's not theology for you to study it in a class in college. It's not law for you just to practice it. But it is something that encompasses both of them. Now, the question that follows from this is great. You have put our basic moral ethics within deen, and that's fine. But why isn't that enough? Why do you need salat and saum and zakat and hajj and laws of what you can eat and what you can't eat? Why is it that you have all of those other details that go beyond just that foundation of what we think it means to be a good person? And so the first step is that we included what makes us a good person that even a secular person or a non-religious person or a follower of other religion will call being a good person. We include that within deen. That answers a question that many people have, which is atheists. They often ask this question. That there's so many different religions, and a follower of any religion agrees that all of the other 500 religions in the world are wrong. Why not just take one more step and say that your religion is also wrong? You're right about those other 500. Chances are your religion is also wrong. Well, if you just look at religion as that superficial part, then yes, that question makes sense. But if you realize that religion is the foundation all the way to the end, then you will realize that the part of religion that people differ about and have ikhtilaf about is actually very limited. Even people with very different sets of beliefs and practices and traditions, and even people who may follow a polytheistic religion, where they have idols. But when it comes down to the essence of deen, then there is much more agreement about values and about what is right than there is agreement about any other field of human endeavor. Try that out. That if you want to argue with somebody who has a very different political view than you do, you might never get anywhere. If you want to argue with an anti-vaccine person, if you believe that vaccines are good, or vice versa, if you are an anti-vaccine person, then if we can tolerate talking to you in the first place, then if we were to argue, we might never get anywhere. And that's something that is straightforward. There is observation, there is experimentation, there is much that we can bring to prove and to demonstrate the validity or invalidity of a particular field. In those areas, there are great differences. But when it comes to values, when it comes to the basis of religion, then the vast majority is something that any well-rounded, well-thinking human being will agree on. And that's what's allowing human civilization to exist in the first place. Because if you meet a person, they're not going to murder you just to steal your iPhone by default. That is because of the deep foundation of deen. So it answers that atheist's question. Because deen is not just that last step, that refinement that tells you the ibadat and the particular teachings that bring you close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it is the foundation all the way to the top. And that is why there is a great deal of consensus. And if you ever want to try to have a meaningful interaction with people of other faiths, or if you look at why the Quran says that Muslims and Christians can get along, Quran says that it is لا يستكبرون, on an ethical basis. Although the theology of Christianity is very different from Islam. And if you look at the teachings, then you might say that Muslims are more similar to Jews in our dietary laws, in the idea of having law in the first place. We eat halal, they keep kosher. And even in the theology of avoiding graven images and idols. But the Quran will tell us that if you are going to find closeness, you will find a greater closeness with Christians. Their theology is less similar to Muslims. Their practices are less similar to Muslims. What is it that is more similar? If you are a Muslim, then your religiosity is rooted in humility and servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Christianity, in spite of getting so many, from a Muslim perspective, theological principles completely wrong. In spite of negating the law, which is completely wrong from a Muslim perspective. But one thing they got right is the primacy of لا يستكبرون. Don't be arrogant. And that, in the logic of the Quran, tells you that you will be closer to them than those other things that might seem to make your religion more similar. Because that is the foundation. So now, the next stage. Why do we need the additional teachings? If Christians can get so much right and be closer to Muslims without law and without even a correct view of Tawheed, do you really need Tawheed? Do you really need to avoid bacon and all of those things that are prohibited that a Christian will eat without second thought? And that is a little bit more difficult of a question. And this is where we come back to the principle that is mentioned in the Quran. We tend to think that the highest truths are scientific or empirical truths. Something that you can see, you can observe, you can prove, you can demonstrate with your senses. But the Quran tells us that underneath the physical, material, empirical world, there is purpose and there is wisdom, i.e., a spiritual and a moral logic. This physical world was created in order to be a manifestation of that truth and that purpose and that spirituality and that morality, which is of primary importance. خلق الله السماوات والأرض. خلق السماوات والأرض is something that you can see with your eyes. You can observe. You can subject to an empirical standard. But خلق السماوات والأرض is underpinned by بالحق. There is haqq. There is truth. And truth means that everything has a place. And everything having a place is where adl and justice comes from. Because justice is to put it in its proper place. And injustice is to remove it from its proper place. Haqq means everything has a proper place and a proper purpose. And that is the basis of the moral universe. And the idea of adl and dhulm, justice and injustice. And that is the reason and the basis for which the physical world exists. And so history is not the highest truth. that history is a means by which the wisdom of God manifests itself. Science is not the highest truth, but those realities that you observe within the physical world, that we sometimes call science and we classify in different ways, they are the manifestation. They are the expression of the wisdom and the purpose and the justice that underlies all of existence. Just to backtrack and make sure that we are all together. Sallallahu alaihi wa ali Muhammad. The question is, why do you need the specific teachings of religion and not just the general moral principles by which a good human being will live? If being can be expanded to include that foundation, why is the foundation not enough? Why do we need the building? And to understand the answer, we have to understand that the physical world is built upon a purpose rooted in truth, which implies justice and a spiritual and a moral order. And that's not something that I can prove to you with a philosophical proof, but it's something that if you think about it, you will observe. That even within the animal kingdom, primates, and there are studies where scientists have tried to measure it, they have a sense of justice. The primate will be happy with the gift of a cucumber, unless the primate in the next case gets a banana. And then they'll get upset, because they have a sense of justice. It's there within creation. Toddlers have a sense of justice. They might not have language skills, but give one of them a piece of candy, they'll be happy, and then give their friend or their sibling 2 pieces of candy. And you will see that they might not have language skills. They might not understand science, but they understand the concept of justice. Or speak to an atheist. Somebody who doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe in intelligent design, doesn't believe that there is a wisdom or a purpose within creation, and yet that person will still live their life on the basis that there is right and wrong. They might not be able to explain it in a logical way based on the idea that there is no God. Because the reason for right and wrong might just be a social convention, or it might just be a psychological need that I have as a human being. But they don't live their life as if truth and right and wrong is just psychological or just social, because it is intrinsic within a human being. Not something that you need to prove, but something that you can perceive and you can sense and you can observe within all of creation. That the physical, that is something that is rooted in a moral order, in justice and in truth. And even an atheist who can deny a source for the physical world and say, I just believe in the Big Bang, cannot escape from living their life according to the principle that there is right and wrong. What they say is right and wrong might be very corrupted based on false ideas. But the idea that some things are right and some things are wrong, it's not possible to live within this universe without coming to terms on some level with that reality. And I'm not saying that as an argument or a proof. I'm saying that as a statement of something that you can observe, contemplate, think, and see if there is any weakness in that observation. That the haqq that permeates all of existence is something that a human being cannot escape. So if that is the case, then what that means is that beyond the physical, beneath the observable, there is haqq, there is adl, there is dhulm, there is right and wrong. There is a basis for morality. And the physical world, which is superficial, and which we have direct access to with our senses, is something that we cannot all understand perfectly on our own. So you can, if you're a physicist, you can explain quantum physics to me. I guarantee you'll waste your life and I'm not going to properly understand it. And that physicist might not understand some intricate concepts within chemistry or within biology or within astronomy or within other areas that are outside of their subspecialty. And that is because the physical world, even though we can directly perceive it, sense it, observe it, and subject it to testing, is something that is incredibly complex. And if morality and haqq is what lies under the physical world as its foundation and as its basis and as its purpose, then you shouldn't expect that morality is going to be superficial or easy to understand. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Are you still with me? That if we can observe within the world that morality and the implications of haqq and justice are the means by which and the foundation upon which the physical world exists, then we shouldn't think that I can just look at my superficial feelings and I can know what is right and what is wrong. That doesn't work for the physical world, which is superficial, which is not as deep. How can it work for the moral world? And that is where we determine that we are in need of something to complement and complete our conscience and our own understanding. And that is where we turn in humility to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us and to tell us what is moral. And so we need that foundation of something that everything human beings can understand. But because morality is deep, even deeper than the physical world, we need those teachings that we are not able to get on our own, that come from revelation. And that is why we need the laws of Islam. They are an intrinsic part, an essential part of deen. They're not all of deen, but they're an essential part of deen. And that is why we need a wali and a guide who is going to tell us what religion requires and what religion needs. So to summarize and then move on. The reason why basic human values are part of religion is because deen is a comprehensive concept that includes not just the expression of our beliefs in words or the outcome of our beliefs in actions, but the comprehensive direction that we face and what we submit to. By direction, what I mean is that which we submit to at every level of our being. The foundation of our ethics and our beliefs and our practices. The reason why we need to move beyond just those general principles that every human being can understand is because as a human being we can feel and we can perceive and we can know that morality is something that is foundational to existence. And if that which is superficial in existence is complex and people can make mistakes about it, then morality is not something that we can take for granted. And that gives us a good answer to the question that if religion is fitrah, then how come people have differences about that which is intrinsic to their nature? What do people not differ about, even when it's directly available to our senses? It's not that deep. If you just look at your senses, you will think the earth is the center of the world, the universe, and it's stationary, and the sun revolves around the earth. You need to think. And for thousands of years, the vast majority of people, although they were intelligent, and they had eyes, and they could see, and they observed the heavens much more intricately than you and I observe the heavens, they thought the earth was at the center of the universe, and the stars, and the moon, and the sun, they revolve around the earth. That's fitrah, because that is creation. But that doesn't mean that it's a matter of consensus. And if that's the truth about what is available to our eyes, how can't it be true about something that is not directly available to our eyes? I can do a scientific experiment to determine the properties of one metal over another metal. But I can't do a scientific experiment to determine whether Fajr should be 2 rak'ah or 3 rak'ah. Because you would need a lifetime, and then the result, it might not even be available in this lifetime, it might show up in the hereafter. So when the physical world, which should be easier, doesn't have consensus, why is it reasonable that people say religion and religious affairs, if they are fitri, should simply have a consensus and everybody should agree? You need to have a source and a guidance, and that is why a wali is essential to the very idea of deen and religion. And that is why the only authentic understanding of Islam, you don't need to use the label Shiism, but it is an understanding of Islam that tells you and that connects you to your wali. Because other than that, then you are separating that connection from the very essence of existence, which is to be connected to the source of morality, which is where our beliefs and where our laws, they come from. So now I want to move on by addressing 2 additional points. And I'm addressing these 2 points because they're important questions and they are things that I want each and every one of us to think about. As I said, we are travelers on this journey together. We are seekers on this journey together. I will give you an answer, but that answer is also a humble student's answer and not a ma'soom's definitive answer. Because I am a student and a seeker on the same path that you are a student and a seeker. It's an important question, and so, inshallah, the answers that we will discuss will bring us closer to appreciating the depth and the profundity of the path of righteousness. The first question is, what does it mean to be true to yourself? A lot of times people, they have a mistaken conception of what it means to be true to themselves. They think it means expressing what you feel. I don't want to be hypocritical and wear hijab if I'm not feeling it. Pray if I'm not feeling it. Be respectful to my parents if I'm feeling angry within myself. I feel that is not being true to myself. I feel that is being hypocritical. I don't know if you've seen, it's a very common conception that people have, that to be true to yourself is to express to act in accordance with what you're feeling, to say what you are feeling. And then it is justified for you to pursue your interests. And so if you go to college, you say, I don't know what to major in. You ask the guidance counselor, then they'll say, well, pursue your passion and your interests because you want to be true to yourself. It doesn't matter if there is money in it or not. If you go to typical Muslim family, especially in certain sections of our community, if you go to your parents as a guidance counselor, they'll say, yeah, you can choose whatever career you want so long as you are a doctor. And then if you say, well, give me at least one other choice. The other choice they give you is, well, fine, if you don't want to be a doctor, you can be a physician, but not anything other than those. There's a different logic there. What is the Islamic conception based on what we've discussed? From an Islamic perspective, because your humanity is something that is deep, being true to yourself is to ask not what do I feel for me to express it, but based on those deeper principles that I hold true, what should I feel so that I can live up to it? You look at what is your potential, and then you try to affirm and live up to that potential. And then if I determine that what Allah wants from me, and what is right, and what is honorable, and what is just, is for me to fulfill a relationship with my family member, even if I don't get along with them, then to be true to myself is not to say, I'm more compatible with my friend, so we're going to minimize our interactions. I don't get along with you. What is true to myself is to try to develop that appreciation for the fact that if Allah gave me a certain parent, if Allah gave me a certain child, I might look at my nephew or my niece or somebody else's child and I say, if that were my child, then it would be so much better. I might look at somebody else's parents, and I'm not going to use the example of the spouse. I might look at somebody else's parents or somebody else's children and say, if I had that family member, it would have been so much easier. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me a certain test, then to be true to myself is to understand that potential. I deserved this child that Allah gave me. Because if this was not what was best for me, then Allah would have given me that other child that I think is better. So to be true to myself is not to express what I am feeling, but to question what I am feeling, to question what I am saying, to question what I am doing, and try to bring it in accordance with that promise and that potential and that responsibility that I have and that Allah has revealed to me within the circumstances of my existence. It might be difficult, but you're being more true to yourself by suppressing your feelings and maybe even suppressing your interests in order to live up to your potential. And you will understand that if you do it, then at the end of your life in this world, and definitely in the hereafter, you will see that that is being true to yourself, because you will come to your proper destination. Yesterday I used the example of freedom. Freedom is something that is part of our fitrah. And as a teenager, many of us, we don't want to hear about limitations. And so freedom to us might mean that we don't study every night. We blow off our classes and cram for our exam at the last minute or try to cut corners. And that might seem to be freedom. And that might seem to be true to myself, because right now I want to do this. But that is a mistake that you will see within this life, and not even after a very long time. It's not really being true to yourself. When you're not able to get a job, when you're not able to support a family, when you're not able to do many of the things that you want to do later in life because your health and your resume and your circumstances don't allow you, then you might realize that it would have been more true to myself now to make a sacrifice then. It would have given me more freedom now than to voluntarily limit my freedom then. And if I wasn't ready to limit my freedom then, it's a blessing that my parents compelled me to limit my freedom and get an education so that I am able to have more freedom now. I'm speaking in generalities to establish a point. Don't look for the exceptions, but look for that general principle that we're speaking about. That you can understand in this world. There might be some things that you don't understand just after you graduate from college and you're looking for a job. You might need to reach the age of 40. You might need to reach the age of 60. And there's other things that we won't understand fully in this world, we'll understand in the hereafter. That's when we will see things clearly. But it will come. And that being true to yourself is first asking, what is it that I need to know? What is it that I need to believe? What is it that I need to do? And then you live up to it. Not just express what comes easy to you or what is interesting to you or what is attractive to you at the moment. So you have a basis for questioning your current feelings and expressions on the basis of deeper principles. And that is how you move from a superficial level of faith to a deeper level of faith. And you can see that journey very clearly among those people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed. You heard very eloquently the story of one of the companions of the Imam, who almost was not a companion of the Imam, Abidi until the eve of Ashura, according to some narrations, the day of Ashura, you would have thought that he would have been a commander in the enemy force. But Hur would question not just his expressions and his feelings at the moment, but whether what he was saying and what he was feeling and what he was doing is correct. And because he valued that deeper principle and he wanted to fulfill it, he was able to succeed in a test where death stood him in the face. And there was every temptation, and there was every excuse, and there was every whispering of shaitan to prevent him from salvation. But just that ability to question and to maintain humility allowed him to overcome habit and history and self-interest and make that journey. One of the companions of Hur says that before the battle of Karbala, Hur realized that this was not going to have a peaceful end. And he went to Ibn Sa'd and he said, "O Umar ibn Sa'd, are you truly going to fight Hussein? Are you truly going to do battle?" And Ibn Sa'd said, "Yes, there will be a battle. The least effect of that battle is that people's heads will fly in the battlefield, and it will be a vicious fight." And from that moment, Hur began to shake. He was a commander. He was responsible for his soldiers and had come up to this point as a lieutenant of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. But he was always questioning himself and asking himself, what is right? And this is when it clicked for him. That on one side you have Umar ibn Sa'd and Ibn Ziyad and Yazid. And on the other side you have, alone and surrounded by enemies, that you have the most beloved person for the Prophet. And in all of creation, you have have the grandson of the Prophet, you have Husayn ibn Ali and his family, and the progeny of the Prophet. And Hur began to shake. He came back to his companion, and he began to seek some solitude. The companion said, if I were ever asked who is the bravest person in Kufa, I would say it is you. Who should I go to do battle with? I would say I want to go to do battle, by your side. Why is it that we have 30,000 soldiers and they have 72, including old men and young boys who are not even old enough to wear armor? And I see you shake when I never saw you fear or shake when you were facing the most powerful enemy. And Hur said that you see that we have a powerful enemy, and before us there is a weak and vulnerable enemy. But I see that I am standing on the border of heaven and hell. And Hur's mother did not raise him to choose hell over heaven. And it is with that decisive decision that Hur mounted his horse and he galloped as fast as he could towards the camp of Imam Hussein. He was decisive, and he began at full speed. But as he approached and he saw Imam Hussein standing before him, history tells us that Hur began to slow, and he began to bow down his head. And he sheathed his sword, and he disengaged his bow. And he began to come slower and slower, until almost as if he were a slave, he stood before Imam Hussein, and in a voice barely audible, he said, Yabna Rasulullah, Hali min tawbah, O son of the Messenger of God, is there forgiveness for someone like me? I was the first to take you away from your chosen path. I was the first to strike fear in the hearts of your children. I was the first who caused you to be deprived of the water of the Furat. And Hur began to count his sins and say to Imam Hussein, I have decided that I don't want to go to hell, but it is somebody who has sinned like I have sinned, able to make amends. The Imam said, oh, Hur, raise your head. It pains me only that when you came to me as an enemy, I gave you and your soldiers water. And now you come to me as a guest, and I have no water or nothing to give you as your host. Oh, if you go to Allah with repentance, then Allah will forgive you, and I will honor you. Come into my fold and be one of my supporters. And Hur said that, O Imam, just as I was the first of those to stand against you, will you give me permission to be the first of those who stand to defend you? And there are narrations that say that while Hur was talking, his son approached, and the Imam gave permission, and then Hur said to his son, oh my son, go and do battle and show me that I have raised you to be courageous, and I have raised you to fight in the defense of truth. And when the son of Hur went to do battle, Hur looked at the courage of his son with pride until his son fell in battle. And he called his father. And Hur began to move forward, and Imam Hussein put his hand on the shoulder of Hur, and he said, oh Hur, do you not know that it is not fair for a father to have to go and lift with his own hand his son, that, O my son, my eyes no longer see. So call out to me, so I know where you are, and your father can come to pick up your body from the battlefield. وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب